Good morning, afternoon, evening. Welcome to another edition of the RotoPros best DFS show that just happens to start at 8 Eastern Standard Time. My name is Rob Diamond, Rob Diamond on Twitter, Sir Robert6 on all the main sites, and welcome to the NHL breakdown for Thursday, October 25th, 2018. I'm really looking forward to tonight's NHL slate. Last night's was really close. Marc-Andre Fleury really let me down from some serious takedown opportunities, but I'm not going to get too worried about that. Tonight's a huge slate. We got tons of opportunities here too. I should also mention Champions League was a lot of fun yesterday, despite not cashing very well at all. So yeah, I'm not too concerned about either of those. Yesterday, the classic Wednesday Blues. So I'm really looking forward to the Thursday slate here tonight. It's going to be an awful lot of fun. I think with such a huge slate, there's always going to be some ownership edges that we can jump on from home teams and line stacks and GPP. And in terms of the cash, I think there's going to be a ton of goals tonight in a lot of the different games. So there's going to be tons of different options that we can go with. Your player pool should be fairly large, in all honesty. So let's just jump right into the slate. I'm looking to go over both DraftKings, FanDuel, and DraftKings tiers here. Hopefully, after I finish the video, go down in the basic info, and I should have everything timestamped for you. So if you're looking to just jump over and view something in a particular game, you don't have to listen to me go on and on and on and on. So without any further ado, let's take a quick look at the schedule here. So we got Philly traveling to Boston, Montreal heading to Buffalo, which should be just a garbage game for every real hockey fan. Nashville traveling to New Jersey, Columbus traveling to St. Louis, LA heading to Minnesota, New York Rangers are traveling to Chicago, Anaheim is at Dallas, Pittsburgh is at Calgary, Washington is at Edmonton, and Vancouver is at Arizona. So in terms of back-to-backs, Vancouver played last night. Let's see who else. Here's the starting goaltenders for today. Let's just jump back. So Florida and New York Islanders, neither of them are playing. Neither of them are playing. Neither of these two teams are playing. Vancouver. So Vancouver's really the first team that we can immediately know we can target right off the bat. And they happen to be playing a really cheap team in Arizona at home. Obviously, it's the very last game, but we'll get there. This is going to be one of the more valuable games of the slate. So I'm really looking forward, excuse me, to that game in particular. But in terms of for right now, let's just jump back to the very beginning here again. Check out the starting goaltenders coming at you from Left Wing Lock, just a site I happen to particularly prefer to use. Brian Elliott's one of the worst goalies in the league. Basically, anytime we get an option at him or Calvin Pickard, it's unfortunate, but the Flyers have just no goalie this season, as per usual. But in particular, this season they're quite nastily bad, allowing 3.5 goals a game. So Pickard isn't much better, and what I'm really excited about this game, Rask isn't really an option for me because Philadelphia are so potent, and this game could just as easily finish 5-4 than it would like 4-0 for Boston or something. Like Philadelphia are most likely going to score. We'll get there. I don't really want to touch too much on the goaltenders, but Boston was on a huge slump there for a few games, and they've definitely turned it around. I'm not sure how many people have willingly or socially bought back into the concept that Boston are completely back in form. So I'm really looking forward to using Boston tonight. In the second game, we have Carter Hutton and Niemi starting for Montreal. This game is disgusting on every level. Like, the goaltenders are so bad that I'm almost considering the notion that like it's going to be a 1-1 game because both teams are just so bad in general. As a whole, I'm definitely more on the Buffalo side of things. Niemi isn't a very good goaltender, and he's been very, very fortunate in his first 2 games, and isn't something that you can bank on long-term whatsoever. And this should most definitely turn around tonight. And there's tons of really interesting options on Buffalo, some really interesting line stacks, a couple of sneaky plays. I really like this game for DFS, but in terms of the casual fan, it's pretty disgusting. Nashville is traveling to New Jersey. Now, this game's very interesting because Pekka Rinne has been out, and Soros got absolutely lit up last game against San Jose. So I'm not sure if his unsustainable win rate was coming to an end, and we're about to see some regression over the next few games, or if he actually just had an off night. But either way, New Jersey at home has been absolutely outstanding this season, and they have a couple of players that you can really rely on in terms of both formats this slate, because this game is honestly packed full of cash options on both sides. So it's hard to say you can't even game stack it. I think it's a very sneaky game stack because neither goaltender are particularly stellar. So yeah, pay attention to this game closer to this evening. Now, again, if you haven't got the notion yet, this video is recorded at 8 Eastern Standard Time. This is before all the morning skates and the morning press conferences, so things can change. Honestly, I don't see Nashville risking anyone else other than Saros. But if they happen to start their backup, just play as we'll get there. We'll get there. But yeah, it's a situation to watch this game because there's lots of really good options for both formats that you can just stick to. St. Louis and Columbus, another game that sneakily has no goaltenders at all. Bobrovsky's been absolutely brutal this year. It's not that he's a bad goaltender. I have a notion I've been talking about throughout all my videos so far this season, and it always touches on the notion that Sergei Bobrovsky isn't going to be a Columbus Blue Jacket next season, and he has no interest in remaining a Columbus Blue Jacket. His heart isn't into it. So until he gets to the point where there's a little bit of, as teachers used to say growing up, light a fire under your bum just to get you going. There's no doubt here that until he gets further on to closer to past Christmas and he starts to realize that he's playing for a contract next season, we can keep targeting this. And Jake Allen has been an absolute disaster so far in nets for St. Louis. So it honestly wouldn't even surprise me to see them start backup goaltenders. They aren't playing back-to-backs. I thought Boston was. I guess not. There doesn't seem to be anyone tonight playing a back-to-back other than Vancouver playing that second back-to-back. So, yeah, I think this, again, has super sneaky goals upside, no goaltender upside in this game whatsoever. And the next game, LA is traveling to Minnesota. Jonathan Quick still coming back from injury, and by all definition, he's been absolutely atrocious. He shouldn't be back to form for another couple games, so I think we can still target him here at Minnesota, who have been more than capable and have one of the better, more affordable of both side goaltenders in Devin Dubnyk. My fear is that they don't start Devin and Dubnyk, but I'm quite confident they will, because LA isn't exactly a slouch team. They are more than capable. It's just they're quite janky and hurt and out of form at the moment. So once again it's closer to Christmas and they're more into form, we can start fearing LA a little bit more. But right now we can target them for almost 4 goals every single game. So Minnesota should definitely be a team to target here tonight, or I shouldn't say target, a team to use here tonight. LA we should be targeting. The next game, Chicago is hosting the New York Rangers, and I'm a big Henrik Lundqvist fan, but he's probably going to get lit up tonight at Chicago for at least 5 goals. Corey Crawford's absolutely back 100%, comparatively to Jonathan Quick, who's still within that 4-goal or 4-game range of coming back from injury. Corey Crawford has surpassed that, and he's completely back into form here. So I have absolutely no problem using Corey Crawford tonight in either format. Both sites, he's probably my favorite goaltender in FanDuel. He's way too underpriced. So I really have absolutely no problem with him down here. But yeah, in terms of this game, it should be a fairly handily easy win for the Blackhawks. And that I'll talk about later. We'll get there. Big slate tonight, right? We're still going here. John Gibson and the Anaheim Ducks are traveling, I should say, to the Dallas Stars. John Gibson is one of the better goaltenders in the league at the moment, and he isn't really someone that I'm looking to target in terms of ceiling. Now, I mean, target is in use Dallas, expecting they're going to blow out Anaheim. there is concerns for me, or there are concerns for me around the depth of Anaheim at the moment and their injuries. So like they're kind of they're rather playing out of their skin for a few games, and they're seeing some pretty serious regression right now. So I'm not exactly looking to use a lot of players from this game. There are a select few, obviously, but in terms of overall goal output, this may be a really sneaky goalie duel between two really talented goaltenders. If you look at their goals against average, like that's basically saying the max ceiling we can expect from this game is a 3-2 game. So I think there's other games to target from goals and salaries, because Dallas's salaries are still really high. So yeah, there are some, we'll get there. There are some plays, but that's pretty sneaky for goaltenders. Calgary is hosting Pittsburgh in what probably should be the highest scoring game of the night, which is unfortunate to say, because I'm really saying, like, for anyone who plays soccer and I should say DFS soccer and has followed my videos or my stuff for any kind of the past couple seasons, over any of the past couple seasons, Manchester City are this crazy team in England that basically every slate, every single one of their players are the most expensive of the slate, and they still go out and score 5 goals and totally justify their salary. That's the Pittsburgh Penguins. Every single slate, they're going to go out here, be the highest owned, most expensive, and still score the most goals of the night, because they're absolutely lit across the board. And especially when they're playing teams like Edmonton and Cam Talbot, or the Flames and Mike Smith, they still should be putting 5 goals in. And the reverse of that too is Matt Murray has been absolutely garbage this season as well. He's winning games, but his goals against average have made every single Penguins game a shootout basically since his first game, got injured, came back, and it's not really changed since. So yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. I know Pittsburgh here on coming close to the tail end of a Western road swing. It wouldn't surprise me to throw in a Casey DeSmith again, just to kind of keep things interesting, because Murray literally has not justified in terms of whether DFS or a real life goals against average. Like, he's just letting in too many goals. And I think obviously anytime you can get the Flames top line at home is always a time to do it, when there's an inept goaltender on the other side of the ice. So that's something to remember too. A very high scoring game here. I think game stacks are very much in play. Washington is traveling to Edmonton. Going to be tons of options in this game. Again, Holtby's been fairly poor this season, so most Washington games end in very high-scoring affairs, and you can see even Edmonton slightly favored by left-wing lock in terms of projection. So, yeah. I'm not necessarily on this is another game stack, like just getting McDavid, Carlson, and Ovechkin into the same card is instantly viable. Now, I'm more tempted to look at the Washington lower lines, like the Backstrom Oshie line. I think that may be one of my favorite lines of the night. But in terms of goaltending, there should be none in this game either, and we should have another 5-4 or 6-5 kind of game where Washington should come out on top. And in the final game of the night, we have Vancouver traveling to Arizona, and Vancouver right now is absolutely decimated by injuries. I don't think they even have a first line anymore outside of Bo Horvat, and that's defense pairing as well. Markstrom isn't. I have to give him some respect, because when you consider his 2.93, that's better than the 3.46, 3.15, 3.38, 3.95. There's one. There's a better one. There's a good one. Obviously Crawford, my favorite goalie of the night, 4.55, 3.87, 3.64. I think at 3.09, I've kind of proved my point. 3.59, 3.38. I can sit here and tell you that Markstrom's not an NHL caliber starting goaltender. He's definitely a backup, but he's putting up better numbers than literally half the list I've talked about, and half of that list all have Stanley Cup rings, whether it's or I shouldn't say Stanley. Yeah, I'll say that. Yeah, whether it's Rask. It wouldn't even surprise me if friggin' Niemi won a cup with someone. Classic Niemi garbage. Jonathan Quick, Corey Crawford, Lundqvist deserves one. Poor guy. Matt Murray, Braden Holtby. So like he's putting up serviceable numbers. It's just he's not a very good goaltender. They're on a back-to-back and they're really hurt. And I have some concerns about Phoenix tonight, or I should say Arizona, excuse me, the Coyotes. But Brant, it may be a case here. You know, sometimes in DFS, I know in football people use this a lot, and it's like the dressing room stories of what's going around, how everyone's feeling, and the flu bug apparently right now is on the Arizona Coyotes, but it hasn't fully hit them yet. I'm not entirely sure if this team is going to be fully up to it tonight. I'm playing them, sick or not, I don't know. But there could be some sickness going around in the Arizona Coyotes dressing room, which could have numerous players feeling under the weather and playing less than optimal hockey. So that's just something to think about again, but I'm not necessarily buying into that. But I know that's definitely an issue in the NHL where certain teams will get absolutely destroyed by sickness. A flu bug will go around, and they'll literally go on a 4 or 5 game losing streak because of it. When you're in a plane together for that long, there isn't really a lot to say in terms of like getting germs ventilated out. So that's just really my goalie takes. We can jump right into the slate here. We'll start with Philly and Boston. We'll do this and Philly and Boston. There we go. So yeah, I already touched on the goalies. You can't really risk Rask, especially at 8.1K, because Philly are just too good, even away from home. But in terms of the defenders, I think Grzelcyk is someone you're probably going to have exposure to tonight, especially in cash. Brian Elliott or Calvin Pickard, whoever they start, is just so bad. And Boston's starting to turn the wheels here again of success that I don't see any reason not to get access to someone like Grzelcyk in the first power play time. Now, I think in GPP, obviously, there's a lot of merit to playing the first line and just maybe even stacking. Excuse me, these 4 as the power play. But in terms of cash, I don't really see the merit on DraftKings to paying up for David Pastrnak because there isn't as many viable, cheap options to be able to get up there. And Marchand just isn't playing at a cash kind of script. He definitely works in terms of the line stack, but in terms of cash, probably I'm leading off, thankfully, with Bergeron and Grzelcyk, whatever, in the first game of the slate. I have no issue going with these 2 in your cash and sticking them in. I think that's a pretty smart option because, like I said, Boston's getting it going again. Brian Elliott is easily one of the worst goaltenders in the league, and Boston at home is always something to shake a stick at, and that's even before we consider Brian Elliott and his lack of skill. But yeah, in terms of FanDuel, the exact same idea over here. Grzelcyk is way too cheap at 3.8K. Now, in terms of, however, in FanDuel, I think there's a lot more availability for Pastrnak paying up, especially with there's a lot more cheaper value options on FanDuel. So, yes, you can get up to Pastrnak, but you won't be able to get to Bergeron. And that's kind of the same situation in DraftKings. However, I find Bergeron's way more accessible on DraftKings from 7.8K, and he also makes a fairly decent, pivot off of the McDavid ownership and salary for 100 more. There's nothing to say McDavid can't get a couple goals or something against Washington, but I just see that being far more superior, way more likely happening with Boston and Bergeron. than it happening with Edmonton and McDavid. Like they're both going to do well. I just think Bergeron has way more ceiling and just as good a floor. But yeah, the exact same idea. Like take one or the other. I prefer going with Bergeron again over here. It's just I feel way more safe access point to the top line of Boston without giving up too much risk and goal necessity because Bergeron is one of the better players in the league. I think that's safe to say. But yeah, again, I think Philly are going to be able to score. There's nothing to say this team isn't capable or more than able to put the puck on the net and in the net. So even though I'm on Bergeron and cash, there's absolutely nothing to suggest Wayne Simmons for 5.2K isn't cash viable this like going up against Boston. Is it the first place I'm going to look? No. But like I said earlier at the start of the video, there's kind of like two tiers of cash viable options this slate. There's the ones without risk and there's ones with risk. The ones with risk still check all the boxes of being cash and technically are just as cash viable as everyone else, but there's always a few circumstances that hold them back. In this case, Simmons is going up against Boston, and while I think he can do well, I'm far more likely to take Boston in my cash before I would take Wayne Simmons going up against Rask at home. Now, has Rask been bad? No, but is he turning things around and more than capable? Absolutely. He's usually a pretty slow starter. So it wouldn't surprise me at all now that Boston have turned the corner from that horrible road swing that they start reeling off some 4-0 wins. And with that concern, I don't see that like taking Brian Elliott in GPP is even just not necessary. It's a completely unnecessary risk. Like you're not accomplishing anything. You're just taking on so much unnecessary variance. So yeah, I would again like. Does that mean I'm going to choose Rask from 8.1K? Absolutely not. There's no way. Philly are just too good. They're definitely going to break the shutout bonus. But like I said, you can play Wayne Simmons. You can definitely get away with Gostisbehere. No question, only 5.5K in either cash or GPP. He hasn't been as hot lately, but in terms of his role and what he does, he's still good for 5 fantasy points once he starts getting going again and we start to see these kinds of numbers. But for now, like I said, I'm definitely more on the Boston side of things. I wouldn't mind a game stack in this game because I do think he can finish 4-2 Boston, 4-3 Boston. But I'm far more inclined to believe that Boston can shut down all the Philly lines with their home line change advantage. Boston are very hurt at the back, which only leads me further to Greischek. But in terms of like game stacking and line stacks, you can definitely go either side, either power play. The Philly power play of Giroux, Voracek, Simmons, Gostisbehere, and Coutier, absolutely viable too. But I'm going to stick to the Boston side here this slate just because I think they're that one of those teams that you just can't miss, no matter how expensive they are. And I'm hoping they're going to get an ownership discount because so many people will be on the McDavid. There's a lot of options this slate, so I think a lot of people will be on the McDavid, Crosby, Malkin kind of noise instead of remembering that Brian Elliott's just absolutely garbage. So yeah, I'm going to say 4-2 Boston. It won't be close. Philly will probably get one close to the end of the first and one late in the game, and it'll be 4-1 for most of the game towards the end. But yeah, Bergeron and Greischek, either format, get them in here tonight. And the same goes for FanDuel. Exact same situation all around. I just see a lot more people choosing the first 3 options before they get to Bergeron. So yeah, 4-2 Boston. Next game on the slate is Montreal traveling to Buffalo. And yeah, as a Leafs fan, I just absolutely hate this game. But obviously, it still does have some decent GPP upside. Not really a whole lot of cash options in this game. I think someone like Jason Pominville is a little bit too expensive, but still really sneaky as a fill. So, like, if you're just building line stacks and you end up in 4.6, I think Pominville is a really interesting option. But in terms of this game as a whole, I just see it finishing 2-1, 3-1 before it finishing something like 4-5-4, 4-6-5. Like the vast majority of these games will. Now, that doesn't mean it won't. I definitely think there's some interest in someone like Ristolainen at only 4.7. I think that's even cash viable this late. But like Jeff Petrie at 6.1 is even too expensive for GPP. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Carter Hutton is a goaltender that's going to rock the world, but Niemi is so bad and he's been so unsustainably good that, like, literally it's only a matter of time before things change. And I have absolutely no issue going super hard over Buffalo this slate and not taking any breaks on them whatsoever. That's the thing here. So, like, I don't see a lot of people owning Buffalo. I really don't. And in terms of, I really like I was saying, I really like using left wing lock because now that we're getting a little bit deeper into the season, we're able to view things. Their 3-game most recent games all kind of make a little bit more sense. So we can see the line breakdown, and you can see that Pominville in the last 3 games has been playing mostly on the first line. And obviously there's the Milstat, Rodriguez, Oposo, and so like their first 4 lines are very, very set, as you can see. And sometimes Eichel will drop down into Reinhart, Sheary. But yeah, I have a lot of interest in Buffalo because I think it's super sneaky. And this is why I'm showing this right now, is because most people by now know the Boston and Philly lines, and they've been so set and haven't really changed too much. Philly's done a little bit of editing with like Kochesny or Travis Kotkaniemi going up to the top line. But yeah, I really like Jason Pominville. I think he's super sneaky this slate as a fill, or even take the top line of Buffalo. I have absolutely no problem with that. Let's see their power play. Not a great power play. But again, just very set forward in terms of their top line. So I really like chasing Buffalo because in terms of line stacks, you know that's what you're going to get across the board. And Niemi is horrible. And I think there's a lot of Habs homers. I got a lot of friends that are Habs homers that will be owners tonight of Niemi just because they're looking at Buffalo and being like, we're Montreal and they're Buffalo. Of course we're going to win. And I completely disagree. Not only from, I'll take my Leafs hat off for a second. I know you're not, the screen share doesn't show that, but my hat's off my head. Montreal really shouldn't beat Buffalo tonight. Even with Carey Price, they're going to be pushed to do it. And now with Niemi in the net, it's an absolute train wreck. I have absolutely no interest in chasing the Montreal waterfalls. You can do a game stack, absolutely. It's more than viable in this slate because they're all so cheap, and you're able to take the game stacks and turn them into something that also brings in like Ovechkin and McDavid, or Crosby and Malkin, or Malkin and Kessel. You get my point. Because yeah, just a lot of really cheap options across the board. Check out their most recent 3, see what we're seeing. So they have 3 very set top 3 lines. Never really seem to change at all. So that can also help in terms of game stacking. So I would probably prefer to chase the Domi, Drouin, Lehkonen line. I think that would probably see the easier matchups in terms of Buffalo. And for the Buffalo, obviously, I would look to take on the first line in either GPPs or game stacks and GPPs. But for cash, I don't really like maybe Ristolainen. I think there's a gazillion better options. He's definitely in that second tier of viable cash plays that you just can't really use. But he's still definitely up there. So, yeah. Let's jump over to FanDuel and take a quick look over here. And Jack Eichel's actually pretty expensive, I found on FanDuel, so I'm not as keen on game stacks on them as I am on DraftKings, because on DraftKings, actually, wow, he is really expensive over here too. I just found the 6.9 was a much more accessible salary, more expensive than Crosby. Wow. Crosby's actually really cheap over here at 6.7K. Anyways, we'll obviously get there. But yeah, where were we? The Buffalo, Montreal. So yeah, as I was saying, I just didn't feel very confident about the game stacks on this on FanDuel as I did. And you can see Restline is way more expensive over here, and Petrie's way cheaper. And that doesn't necessarily mean either salary is right. They could both be wrong on both sides. So yeah. Again, this is such a gross game. It's really hard for me to pin a score line on, because I feel like it's going to be a 2-1 game. But at the same time, like, the Emmy's so bad and Carter Hutton hasn't been that good to suggest he can keep Montreal under 2 goals. So yeah, 4-3 maybe. I would like to see a 2-1, but it could very easily get to a 4-3 game. So yeah, that's my take on Montreal and Buffalo. Next game on the slate is Nashville traveling to New Jersey. And this is another game where we're looking at both sides are absolutely chock-filled with first and second-rate cash options. So both of those 2 tiers of the cash concept is absolutely filled here. All the centers are way too cheap in this game, but I'm not really looking to target any of them. In terms of the wingers, that's really where you find the love across the board. All the Nashville wingers are too cheap, especially someone like Victor Arvidsson. I know he hasn't been playing super lights-out hockey, so I'm not really totally keen on him in something like cash. But GPP, I have absolutely no idea. No idea. Excuse me, no idea why what I'm talking about. Obviously, no reason not to take him. Check the power play, make sure maybe that's why. No, I know. I obviously, like, yeah, that's just way too cheap for Arvidsson, even going up against Kincaid at home. Again, this is a story, this game, between 2 goalies that are really unproven, and Kincaid and Saros. Like, I know Kincaid's been playing enough now that we can probably call him proven, and New Jersey plays a style of game that really benefits the win. But when he loses, as you can see in the last couple of games, it's an absolute disaster because a lot of the times New Jersey doesn't allow a lot of shots on net. And if he happens to let in any amount of goals, you're getting literally negative points, where someone like, for example, Hellebuck last night finished with 3 fantasy points. You know what I mean? So, like, it just isn't. There's not a lot of ceiling upside on either of these two. And then you get to something like the defense. It's like, sure, you can take PK Subban. I wouldn't recommend Josie. He still isn't playing well enough. But, like, Will Butcher's a really interesting GPP option. The wingers are incredible across the board. Like, you can take Taylor Hall and cash. Again, he's more of a second tier to me tonight. I'm not as into him as some other options on the wing. But like, all of these guys, again, are totally worthy of different types of stacks. I think Coleman is incredibly it's interesting because there's actually, well, I shouldn't say it's Coleman. There is one player here that I'm going to be rocking tonight in both cash and GPP that I'm expecting to go super under-owned and basically kind of anchor my value plays. And it's going to be Brian Boyle at 3.2. Now, a lot of this is reliant on him getting power play minutes. So basically, where are we here? Yeah. Daily Faceoff and Left Wing Lock have a disagreement over who plays on the first power play minutes. And they say it's Coleman, as you can see here, with Hall and Palmieri. And that was from team practice on yesterday morning. But if we look at the most recent 3 games on the power play, because Zajac's been out hurt, Brian Boyle has stepped up into the power play game. So if Brian Boyle, or excuse me, if Zajac is out hurt again tonight, Brian Boyle is easily one of my favorite plays on the slate. Yeah, getting power play 1 minutes on New Jersey for only 3.2K against a goalie like Saros, who got absolutely lit up the other night. I have no problem with that. One of my favorite plays of the slate, honestly, and I'll be a little bit more frank about it too. He's been playing very well, as you see recently. He announced literally within the last 48 hours that he's beaten cancer. So I'm not going to sit here and say Narrative Street's totally in play, but yeah, Narrative Street's probably in play here, and he's probably playing like he's 100 pounds lighter. 3.2K is way too cheap for someone in this role for this game. And then whenever you consider the emotional, mental aspect of it, I have absolutely no issue. Brian Boyle all night, either format. One of my favorite plays of the slate. 3.2K if he gets a goal from that, or even an assist, which again, he has goals in back-to-back games. I have absolutely no problem with that. But again, this is totally reliant on Travis Zajac now playing. If Zajac is in the lineup, which again, he was skating the previous morning, you're probably going to have to fade Brian Boyle, which is too bad. But make sure to check the lineups, the on daily faceoff and left wing lock this afternoon before you make your picks, because they should have the Zajac news whether or not he's playing. So like I said, he practiced yesterday, but that doesn't mean Brian Boyle will necessarily lose his power play miss, because he's just been playing so well. But yeah, jumping over to FanDuel, exact same situation as I was just sorry, I should touch a little bit more on this too. Like I said, there's lots of options on both sides of this game. Like Craig Smith continues to be an elite cash option still every single slate. It doesn't really matter who he's playing against. He's always going to have a really solid floor. He takes basically 1 point worth of shots and usually blocks 0.5 worth of shots. So all you really need is one more shot from him in that scenario, and you're in gravy town. And if you can get an assist or goal from that, he totally pays off at only 5K. And that's a consistent thing every single slate. So that's why I love him for cash. But he's identical to Simmons to me in the second tier of player that you can't really access because of a game script and basically what side of the game you're taking. So yeah, I don't mind Butcher for GPP. I really like Brian Boyle both sides. Craig Smith's in my second tier, and I would probably look to stack the New Jersey line one wherever I get the chance, because it's generally too cheap. Palmieri and Taylor Hall may look expensive, but when you combine them with the centerman, that's 3K cheaper than most other line stack centerman's cost. It's really hard to turn down. So yeah, I really like New Jersey in this matchup, to be honest. I think it could be a 4-1 game, New Jersey, and I think Brian Boyle gets multiple points this game. I love him from 3.2. But yeah, checking this over here, make sure, yeah, we'll check the wingers now, because I know obviously Craig Smith's a little bit more expensive over here comparatively. But yeah, Brian Boyle, I think he's actually a center on FanDuel, which is a little bit it's tough, because now you really can spend. Oh, I should say it's tough. This is interesting now because you're avoiding a lot of other center ownership that kind of cancels each other out, whether it's McDavid and Kuznetsov and Backstrom, or it's Malkin and Crosby and the Monahan Johnny Hockey line. You know what I mean? It all sort of cancels each other out in terms of who's going to be better. Like, they all could be really good, so it's tough to pick and choose. So you may as well just go with spots where you know they're going to go off, and the wingers are absolutely jacked this slate. I think wingers have really set and true roots to high floors and high ceilings at the same time. And basically, when you take someone like Brian Boyle and you drop down to Grosschuk, you can literally take all the 4 most expensive wingers to the slate, and you're not You're not. Well, yeah, you are pretty toast. Actually, you're going to have to drop a couple of those too. I wouldn't take Pasternak over here. But yeah, in terms of Kane and Ovechkin, absolutely playable over here. Whenever you take someone like Brian Boyle and you spend down on your other defensive spot, because we'll get to goalies in a bit, and the goalies are super super cheap this slate. So yeah, in terms of. I don't think there's any other really options, serious options. Nosen interests me. He keeps popping up on my radars, but I'm not that interested to the point of like being convinced I should play him. I would much rather stick with the Brian Boyle pick. Yeah, let's say 4-1 New Jersey, maybe 3-1, but Brian Boyle multiple points. Next game of the slate, we have the Columbus Blue Jackets traveling to the St. Louis Blues, and like I said, a game that's completely lacking goaltenders. So it's kind of tough to pick and choose from this game what side you go on, because you can definitely take Tarasenko, but from his salary, you're kind of cutting out the legs from everything else you can take. And on top of that, he hasn't really been performing well enough to compare to the other cash options that you can get for either spending up or spending down. So yeah, I'm not really that interested in Tarasenko in cash. You can 100% take game stack this game to the nines because both top lines in this game are super super affordable. Whether it's the Columbus first line of Dubois, Atkinson, and Panarin, or the first line of the St. Louis Blues with Tarasenko, Shen, and Jaden Schwartz. Very, very viable salaries. You can get all of them in. So I have absolutely no issue with that. Oh, we meant to go game day. There we go. So yeah, Dubois, Atkinson, Panarin is like the go-to spot here. So like, yeah, it's tough because you could look to the second line of Wenberg, Foligno, and Duclair. I also really like them a lot. But in terms of St. Louis, I'm not really that thrilled about anything else other than their first line stack. It gets a little bit less viable the further you go down. So I'm more into St. Louis 1, Columbus 1, or Columbus 2. Oh, did that wrong. St. Louis Blues game day. So yeah, Schwartz, Shen, Tarasenko, and then going either Columbus 1 or Columbus 2. Zachary Sanford's really interesting to me. He got a goal last night too. I was actually going to take him as a super punt play. I chickened out and didn't end up on it, but yeah, he's also really cheap over in DraftKings too. So that's where I originally saw him. Where is he here? Yeah, at only 3.3K. Not really interested tonight. I'd rather stick with game stacking this or taking. Actually, you don't have to game stack this, but the only line from St. Louis I'm really interested in stacking is the top line of St. Louis, and both the first and second line for Columbus are stackable because both the goalies are so brutal in this game. They're absolutely horrendous. And like, yeah, I wouldn't play Bobrovsky at 8K. Not interested. So that's generally my take on DraftKings. Vince Dunn is too expensive on DraftKings at 4.6K, but he's absolutely still totally viable to be played on FanDuel. Over here, he qualifies as the second tier of kind of cash plays that I'm really not interested in. But I know he is a cash play and can totally be viable and used, especially from that salary. I still like others. But yeah, and again, like you can absolutely play any of these guys in cash. I'm not really interested in Tarasenko as much as I would be Atkinson or Panarin. But yeah, on FanDuel, that is, you can absolutely, because again, the wingers are different over here, especially if you take a cheap winger like Brian Boyle. There's other cheap wingers, or cheap centers, excuse me, like Brian Boyle, and there's other cheap centers that I'll show you throughout here too. That there's a few more we're coming up to, but yeah, in terms of this game, probably 5-4 St. Louis, 5-3 St. Louis. I'm interested to see. I think St. Louis will outscore Columbus, and Columbus will score goals. But I'll be interested to see if Columbus can actually keep up the scoring pace with St. Louis. So that's really. I know though, like St. Louis are letting in at least 3 goals. So yeah, 5-4, 5-3 St. Louis. and game stack it, but not. I wouldn't suggest. Definitely wouldn't suggest any of the cash in DraftKings. Next game, LA at Minnesota. So as I was mentioning here earlier, Jonathan Quick has just been absolutely horrible form for LA. So he's absolutely, double down the absolutely. Apparently, we can just target Minnesota freely here. In either format, we should absolutely be fine. Now, in DraftKings, Mikko Koivu is incredibly cheap at only 4.3K, and I really do like him for cash. I think he's totally viable. Not as viable over here on FanDuel, especially when you compare him to someone like Brian Boyle. But on DraftKings, there's not really many other playable centers cheaper than Mikko Koivu, and he also happens to be fairly viable for cash. For GPP, I'm really not as interested because his ceiling isn't crazy. You're not going to see any 7.9-point games from him. So that's why he is so cheap down there. So I'd probably stay away from him for GPP unless like you're super desperate for someone who just won't finish zero. But in terms of cash, I think there's lots of options for Minnesota. Ryan Suter is a little bit too expensive for me on DraftKings. So I'm not really as keen over there, but on FanDuel, I think he's more playable at 5.5. He's probably the leading candidate of the second tier type of cash plays that I can't really play tonight. His salary is untouchable over here, and it's just there's better options on FanDuel. There's so many incredible, cheap, viable options on FanDuel for defense. So I just don't really have that much interest for spending up for either format, especially on FanDuel. Not really much either in DraftKings. So if there was a couple of guys from this game, I would definitely look at. Oh, sorry, Darren. I really meant to mention someone from Columbus. There is one really sneaky play here from Columbus that you're going to be able to fill with 100%. And I think he is going to make one of the definitely the sneakier play of the slate, especially if Jake Allen craps the bed like I think he will. And it's on Columbus winger for 4.1K Boone Jenner. Absolutely cash viable, in my opinion. He's probably the bottom of the barrel in terms of the first tier of cash viable options, but I want to show you why he is such an incredible play of the slate, especially on FanDuel. He literally plays basically all penalty kill, one, power play one, maybe two, actually. We'll see here in a second. Yeah, that's what I thought. Power play one, and even on even strength, he gets excellent minutes with Riley Nash and Josh Anderson. So I have absolutely no problem with Boone Jenner in either. I don't really like him in terms of stacking his line. I prefer him as a filler. So, like, again, if you're on a completely different game stacking, or you have two random lines that you manage to fit together and you need to find someone at 4.1K with some really sneaky upside, I really like Boone Jenner. He plays all three styles for Columbus. And is way too cheap at 4.1K. Now, is he someone that's going to go out and lights out every single night? No, absolutely not. As you can see, he's only gotten a goal so far this season, but he still had a serviceable floor where he hasn't gotten a zero yet. So really, all you need is just a little bit of love. And against someone like Jake Allen, there should be lots of love to be had. So if, again, like, this is how I target goaltenders, is I just find the players that are playing literally maximum role minutes against the goaltender and just rock with them as much as I can. So Boone Jenner is going to be one of my favorite fills of the slate. I also think he definitely works over here on FanDuel, only 4.3K. Either format, I'm not as crazy bullish as some other value plays, but it still goes without saying that I really wanted to talk about Boone Jenner. I'm so sorry for not bringing that up. Back to LA and Minnesota. Zach Parise is half interesting from only 5.8K. He was in a lot of my preliminary cash builds because I figure LA and Quick is so bad. But I found so many other better wingers to pay up for and better wingers to pay down for in cash. So I really came off Parise, but again, he's definitely a second tier type of cash play that you can totally use. And like I said, Mikko Koivu at only 4.3K is just way too cheap this slate going up against someone like Jonathan Quick. It gives you a really idea how far down he is here. So yeah, I have absolutely no problem with him. Taking a Minnesota and Columbus stack, I think, is super viable with like Koivu and Parise and GPP with like some Dubois and other things like that, because it opens up a lot of doors where you're able to get all the expensive guys to fill in with as well. But yeah, in terms of over on FanDuel, it's a little bit of the same story. I haven't. I'll bring up the goalie here in a second. Sorry, I'm not as jacked up at Suter and FanDuel. Again, there's so many incredible defensive options on FanDuel. But in terms of Zach Parise, is again a little bit too expensive for me. And Mikko Koivu is a little bit more expensive than he is in DraftKings, making him not as interesting a play, especially compared to Brian Boyle. But probably I want to say my first or second favorite goalie play this slate is definitely going to be Devan Dubnyk on Minnesota. I think it's the safest win of the entire slate. At home, Minnesota is really good. LA have been fairly poor. LA are historically a really low-scoring team, so there isn't a whole lot of threat of Minnesota getting blown out as is. And on top of that, Jonathan Quick has just been really bad. So I don't see this being like a crazy high-scoring game, but I see it being very efficient in a very efficient way to help you achieve some GPP scripts that will be super low owned. Because like I said, I don't know how many people will be on the idea that Jonathan Quick is 4 goals a game. And when you consider these salaries, 4 goals a game is pretty obtainable, where Boston are probably at that same kind of 4 goals a game, but cost a full $1,000 more at least across the board. So like I said, just an efficient way to get where you need to go this slate is Minnesota. But Devan Dubnyk in either sites, either format, definitely one of my top 3 goalies, probably my second favorite goalie of the slate. And he isn't the most expensive on either site, which is also great. So like I don't feel like I'm taking a ton of risk with a salary that it isn't I'll get there. Obviously, I still Corey Crawford, but yeah, in terms of Devan Dubnyk's probably one of my favorite in DraftKings to use. I actually will say Devan Dubnyk on DraftKings is my number 1 goalie. He isn't on FanDuel, is my number 2 goalie, but still absolutely viable. And for a score in this game, let's go 4-1 Minnesota, 4-0, 3-0 Minnesota, something like that. LA will be pushed to score more than once. I'll be really surprised if Minnesota failed to score more than twice. Next game on the slate is New York Rangers traveling to Chicago. And I am jacked up about this game. Very viable game all around. I think Corey Crawford's probably my favorite goalie play of the slate. But since he is so expensive on DraftKings, I'm not as gung-ho about it. On FanDuel, you have to play Corey Crawford at 7.9K. Like, he, again, tops my list this slate of the egregiously underpriced players. 100% should be one of the top salaries of the slate. He's just so underpriced because he hasn't played enough games yet this season. So, yeah, feel free to jump all over Corey Crawford in either format on FanDuel. A little bit too expensive for me on DraftKings, but that's kind of the case with Chicago across the board in DraftKings. I'm still going to be using Patrick Kane. It's really hard to just deny a person that shoots the puck at least 5 times basically every game. He had an off game there, but like completely came back to it. Like there's just no reason not to, especially with the different types of builds that we're going to be able to go with here. He's more than affordable. The Rangers shouldn't have any answer to this whatsoever. But other than that, I'm not really too geared up for it on DraftKings as much as I am on FanDuel. I think the Blackhawks are in general way too underpriced on FanDuel. So that's generally where I'll be looking a lot to play my Blackhawks, but definitely Kane and cash on DK where you can afford it. You should be able to afford it with how I'll be showing you to build throughout this video. But yeah, in terms of FanDuel, yeah, Henry Jokeru is a must play from 3.6K against the New York Rangers. He's still playing line one. I know his production has dropped significantly over the past few games, and that's why he's gone from like 5.6 down on DraftKings. So you can see his salary like just completely plummeted, and that's fine. Like I'm not necessarily looking for this tonight. I think he just makes for an incredible play for the amount of time he'll be on the ice against New York. Now, the Rangers are playing fairly good hockey at the moment, but that only really leads me more to feel like Corey Crawford's even a better play on FanDuel because they haven't priced him for how well New York should be playing. I think New York does have warrant. Don't get me wrong. In GPPs, you can definitely take their first line of Zibanejad, Zuccarello, and Kreider, I believe it is. Let me just double check that. Yeah, exactly. I have no problem with that line. They're playing out of their skin at the moment. But in terms of overall generality, I'm looking at Corey Crawford as one of my top goalie plays. So I'm not really looking at the New York Rangers. That isn't to say, again, they can't ruin me like everything always has. That's usually when I lose, it's because the one goalie I was on just got ruined for 4 goals. So yeah, like I definitely have faith in Rangers and GPP, but in terms of cash, load up on Drew Crew on FanDuel. Absolute must play with Corey Crawford. And again, when you're spending down here already, you can see where we're spending down. And Corey Crawford being so cheap, you can absolutely afford Patrick Kane. Either site, either format, get him in there this slate. Is he my favorite play of the entire slate? Probably not, but I like you'd be wrong to deny him. Just don't deny him. Yeah, 4-1 Chicago. Let's say again 4-0 Chicago. I don't know if they'll score that many goals, but I like Chicago to keep the Rangers under less than a goal more than basically any team this entire slate. So yeah, my biggest concern is I don't think that's necessarily like breaking news or something. I'm pretty sure everyone knows that the Rangers are probably going to be held under a goal. So that's kind of a GPP swing again to go more Rangers. But yeah, I just like Corey Crawford too much and Patrick Kane on either site. But yeah, I'll say 4-0 Chicago because I want to. Next game on the slate, Anaheim traveling to Dallas. Another really exciting game here with some really interesting picks. Jonathan Gibson on Anaheim is statistically the best goaltender in the league right now, one of the best goalies in the league. So I have no issue using him in some GPP if you want to be like super brave. But honestly, I'm not really into either goalies this game, even if Ben Bishop does well, which I expect him to. I don't expect him to get like lit up or something crazy, but even if he does well, I don't see the Ducks putting on the kind of shots to offset the amount of saves he would need in case he lets in a goal compared to a lot of the other teams. So in terms of like the goal upside coming from Anaheim and their lack of shots, I'm a little bit wary on Ben Bishop, but there's still lots of options on either side of this game. We can go with Lindell is always a good little value option for only 3.7K. I don't mind him this slate at all if you want to be spending down at defense. Probably though, my favorite value play this slate is going to be Pitlick on Dallas for 4K. Radulov's going to be out again tonight. Now, be careful about this. Though these things get reported, it wouldn't be the first time when Radulov was reported not to be playing and ended up playing. I'm dead serious. Like if there was a thing, you know what I mean, like a narrative, it's Radulov kind of does that. So I'm not really like as like gung ho on this as I'd like to be because I don't trust Radulov. But if he is in fact out again. And throughout the morning skates this morning, Pitlick is still lining up on line 1 power play, line 1 even strength. You're going to have to play him the slate at only 4K because Dallas are unquestionably, undeniably the most explosive line 1 at home in the league with Sagan and Jamie Benn. Absolutely destructive force. Are they my favorite line to stack this slate? No, they are not. I definitely give them warrant, obviously, and especially in a slate when if you spend any kind of money on any of the other centers and stack them with a winger, there's no way you're getting the Dallas top line. So I don't think they'll have as much ownership as they normally would. But at the same time, too, I'd rather just kind of get Pitlick instead and go for my exposure the cheap way because he still is more than viable at only 4K. Probably one of my favorite cash plays of the slate, to be honest. He was last slate too, and I have absolutely no issue going immediately back to the well on him. Now, if on both sides, 3.3K is way too cheap on this site. You know what I mean? That's why we're going to be able to spend up on Patrick Kane and Ovechkin and another winger. Like we're literally, if we can we even afford it? Yeah, we still can. Yeah, so we'll still get lots of options here. But anyways, as I was saying, that Dallas line 1, you can always rock them in GPP. The 3 of them work really well because Pitlick offers a kind of salary relief where most other line 1s, like for example Calgary, that's a really bad example. Most other line 1s have 3 players across the board that are really expensive, like Boston. You get that same kind of Boston kind of firepower from Dallas with their 3, but Pitlick offers that massive discount. So yeah, logic for me dictates that I was so wrong about Ben Street last slate that I have to be. This slate is probably going to be the one he comes back. Now that being said, he definitely didn't play enough minutes to really get anything done last slate. So I'm not interested. I'm not really going back to Anaheim at all this slate. I think Ben Bishop's probably one of the better informed goalies in the league right now. So I'm not looking to pick on that. Again, it's like a 4-1, 4-2 game for Dallas. Anaheim will probably score late at most for their second goal. So, yeah, I'm really into Dallas in GPPs, but in terms of cash, I'm just going to stick that Pitlick in there and roll with that. Next game, we have Pittsburgh at Calgary. Now, this is really tough because basically everyone in their pet is going to be owning Pittsburgh, like always. And I don't think Calgary or Mike Smith is really much more than a GPP hope. At the same time, Matt Murray's been absolutely garbage. So there's no reason not to look at this as a potential game stacking option where you can take Johnny Hockey and Sean Monahan and fill in with either the Crosby or Malkin and Kessel or something along those lines. So, yeah, I really like this in terms of a game stack. There isn't too many fillers from this game that I like. I suppose, like, my concern right now is that Malkin's getting a little bit too expensive and Crosby's probably too cheap. So you could use Crosby. I don't know what Calgary are going to do. Like, I really don't. Are they going to get the Monahan, Johnny Hockey out against Malkin, or are they going to get him out Crosby? Because if they get him out against Malkin, that's just setting up Crosby to dominate all game again. And he has been, if you didn't see his game-winning goal against Edmonton, like he's playing well. So I have absolutely no issue using Crosby here in cash. It isn't my favorite cash play of the slate. He's definitely an upper level first tier cash option. I just still, again, there's a couple other centers I like a little bit more, which allow me to get someone like Ovechkin in the next game, or we'll see here in a second. But yeah, in terms of Calgary, I would really just stick with the first line and hope they can get something going. But It probably should be a 5-3 Pittsburgh win. And that's like my concern again is that Pittsburgh are going to score their salary worth. Crosby is going to do what he does to pay off at 6.7K. Is it something I'm crazy comfortable doing? No, but it's still going to happen. So, 5-3 Pittsburgh. We can take a look over here. It's a little bit of a different situation. Where is because Crosby's way more expensive over here than he is on DraftKings. So I'm not as keen about Crosby on FanDuel. If you're going to play him tonight, play him on DraftKings. Absolutely, 100%. 5-3 Pittsburgh, Crosby, 2 goals and an assist because it's Crosby. That's what he does. Next game of the slate, Washington at Edmonton. We're almost done. We're getting there. This is another game that's just going to draw so much ownership, and I don't think any Cam Talbot doesn't deserve to be in the crease right now. So, I don't see a way around this other than taking Ovechkin and cash. I think you can get away with John Carlson and cash. Obviously not both of them. It's going to have to be one or the other. But I've been reading some very interesting articles going around right now talking about sustainability over the next month or so in NHL. And John Carlson's leading the league right now as one of the most unsustainable players. Now, he could just be having a career season and absolutely dominating, coming off a cup win and had a great summer and has just come back absolutely stellar. Or what he's doing right now just isn't sustainable and won't continue for much longer. And he clocks in as one of the highest, sell high players, I guess you could call him, in the entire league. So, I think actually, even if I remember correctly, they Left Wing Lock had an article on, and he literally leads the league in like the most unsustainable. Where is it? Oh, that's Goalies now. Oh, they did the Goalies before it was defenders. And he was definitely one of the most unsustainable defenders in the league. And that isn't to say he isn't good. It's just like his salary is just exorbitant now, and it's almost too much. So I'd rather just stick with Ovechkin, who you know is going to do what he does, and take him in cash and roll with that. Now, in terms of Edmonton, I'm just straight fading them tonight, except for game stacks or line stacks and cash. I'm not venturing into the McDavid world. I would rather go the Crosby, and last night should have showcased why. Don't get me wrong. I'm a McDavid hater. I won't even pretend. I won't even try to fake around the bush. It's generally tough for me to play McDavid at his salary. Braden Holtby hasn't deserved any kind of respect from me to not take McDavid in GPP, but in cash, I'm just going to look elsewhere for other salary options and spend up on the wing because they shouldn't be able to hold down Ovechkin. Nobody should be able to stop Ovechkin this slate. Probably, again, the better winger of the slate. So over on FanDuel, it's the exact same situation. McDavid's just too expensive across the board, like unnecessary to spend that much more on FanDuel, which really has driven me off him on DraftKings too. I think, like I said, you can absolutely take Ovechkin here, and you're left with more than enough money to literally do whatever you want in terms of wingers. You can literally take your pick. There's lots of names I've talked about already in there. And even then, you don't even have to take Bergeron. If you're like, screw you, I want to take McDavid, go ahead. 6.3K. Well, that's too bad. Now you have to take Jeff Skinner, line one going up against Niemi. That's not fair. It's or Palmieri, one of the most consistent forwards this season so far. So whatever. Do what you're going to do. Basically, I think Brian Boyle and Pitlick on FanDuel with Joe Crew are massive value so far. We haven't got to the last game yet, obviously. I think this is probably another 5-3 Washington win. I don't think Holtby can shut out Edmonton. The thing with McDavid especially, again, I brought up last video, Chris, my fellow NHL guy here on RotoPros, he brought up a really interesting stat about how basically McDavid is Edmonton, and he's more the team's sole output player than basically anyone in the entire league. It's not even remotely close. So like if Washington can shut him down, which honestly, if there's anyone that could, it would be Nicholas Backstrom or Kuznetsov. So maybe Edmonton can get a line, a matchup out there and sneak one in on them. But yeah, I just don't like the ownership salary upside kind for McDavid. I'm just not into the slate. So yeah, 5-3 Washington, but get Ovechkin in where you can. Final game of the slate, we have Vancouver taking on Arizona. Now, this is the game to pay attention to throughout the afternoon and into the evening and to prepare for. The fact is, the Vancouver Canucks are absolutely destroyed by injuries. Probably they're better of the two centers. Their line two center, their first line winger, first defensive pairing is probably both going to be out tonight. So yeah, like what do you expect? Really, what are you expecting here? Like Bo Horvat, sure, he's literally all they have. Maybe he'll step up and go ham. Take him in cash. I don't even hate that, especially if you're bought into the narrative that Arizona are really sick right now. Because like I said, Bo Horvat is basically all the Canucks are going to have for the next foreseeable future. And that's some pretty consistent numbers whenever you consider looking for a cash option. So yeah, I don't hate Bo Horvat this slate, especially for cash, but I think I would rather look on the other side of the ice here. Derek Stepan, only 5.2K, is far more appealing to me going up against Markstrom at home. He should get lots of different matchups because that's really the issue with Vancouver right now. Even before all these injuries, they were struggling with depth, team depth. They don't have any. So now without literally both of their first line wingers, like yeah, they're down to basically scraps, and these two both could be out. Like, I don't literally know what they'll do if both Edler and Tanev are at this late. I really don't know what they'll do. It could be an absolute disaster. So, like I said, there is some warrant to someone like Ranta. If he does start, I think at 7.9K is really interesting to me in GPP. I'm not usually keen on taking someone coming back from injury or sickness. So it isn't like the first place I want to look. But if Kempfer is playing, if Kempfer starts, absolutely cash viable, 100% from 7.7K. An excellent goaltender. He backstopped Dubnyk on the Minnesota Wild in the past, and he was more than key. He took the #1 job from Dubnyk on occasion. So more than capable goaltender. I'm totally bought into Kempfer if he gets to start today. So like I said, it's something to monitor throughout the afternoon and evening because Kempfer starts, he's the goaltender of the slate. Like, it's him. And I know 2.8 isn't the most ideal place to go looking, but yeah, like I said, you drop that out, you put in something like Mikko Koivu, and you're totally set again. But yeah, Kempfer, he could very easily be the goalie of the slate. Depends if you're on the Horvat train or not. But yeah, that is really it. I do like Arizona a lot this slate, obviously. I prefer their second line of Stefan and Christian Fischer. I think Christian Fischer also makes for an incredible cash play this slate. If I was to drop anyone and put someone in, it would absolutely be Christian Fischer. It would be one of the first people I'll look to get into my cash cards. Getting him and Stefan into game stacks is some of my favorite things to do because comparatively they're only 9K, which isn't that much more than all the big expensive centers. Roughly 9K, excuse me. That's a pretty serious hyperbole there, but you get my point. So yeah, depending on what goaltender you want to go with this slate, I think this what you see here on screen is a really, really solid build for cash. You have all the upside you need, really good value options, and yeah, a good amount of money left here to pick and choose. Even if you like a certain goaltender that you disagree with, but it still fits in here, feel free to go with. But in terms of FanDuel, yeah, the same situation. This is why I like FanDuel so much more this slate. The value defense is so superior that 7.75 is more than enough to get a legitimate game stack in. And I haven't even touched on how cheap Arizona are over here. Ekman Larson is too cheap on both sites. So yeah, like 4.2K is just too cheap. You can just as easily take him in cash, and you're still flying. So yeah, I have absolutely no issue with some of Ekman Larson. Where is he over here? See, Horvat's still super cheap. A little bit more expensive for Stefan, but Christian Fischer is still way cheap over here too. So I have no issue with that. And yeah, Ekman Larson's a little bit more expensive on FanDuel. I'm not a fan of that whatsoever. But yeah, the goaltenders, like I was saying, really cheap, especially on FanDuel. When you get down to like literally some of the cheapest goalies of the slate. So that's where you'll find Ranta. So yeah, either, Ranta or Darcy Kempfer, who, like, I'm praying Darcy Kempfer gets the start. 7.2K on FanDuel is like the goalie of the slate, no question, easily. And he may not like get a shutout. That may not be the first thing on tap for him. But yeah, I absolutely no issue with him whatsoever. So very quickly, let's take a quick look at the tiers. I think actually, what I want to say, sorry, was I haven't looked at the tiers yet today. What I wanted to do was give everyone literally how I do tiers. So because usually what ends up happening here is that I already know what I want to do ahead of time, and I start telling everyone, and that doesn't really give you an idea of my process breakdown in tiers. So yeah, let's look at that now. So Pastrnak, Kane, Ovechkin, McDavid. Immediately know we have to choose between Ovechkin and David, Kane, and Pastrnak. Okay, let's look at what's in the next tier, because all these guys are absolute flames. Again, unless I'm McDavid, because I think he'll probably get the ownership. But yeah, let's see what's next here. Bergeron, Sagan, Kuznetsov, Zibanejad. Okay, so we obviously immediately see we can either stack Bergeron and Pastrnak, or Ovechkin, Kuznetsov, and then Zibanejad, McDavid, and Sagan, or and Patrick Kane, are all random one-offs. So that's the start there. So what you can already assume now is that later on these tiers, we should see the stacking option to Patrick Kane and McDavid and Zibanejad and Dallas, probably in the same rough tiers there. So tier 3. Carlson, so we can go right back to Washington again, which is really sexy. Malkin, we haven't seen any Pittsburgh yet, have we? Yeah, that's the first Pittsburgh. Okay. Chicago, so there's DeBrincat. We haven't seen Taves yet, so that's interesting. Hall and Eichel. So no real stacks other than the beginning of the 3-set Washington, and you could be a couple deep into DeBrincat. But yeah, that's a strange start so far. Okay, let's keep looking here. Tier 4. Subradlov's out. Letang, Parise, Gaudreau, Taves, Oshie. Okay, so Oshie's in the mix now. Doesn't really instantly correlate with the rest of Washington, but if you're just going for a hard Washington stack, you can just keep clicking Washington names here across the board, and he totally fits. Now, Taves fits in here with DeBrincat and Kane, but leaves 2 open. So what's in 2 that isn't in there? Because what you should look for now is, so we know DraftKings wants us to stack Taves and DeBrincat and Kane. So what would be in here and not in there that they also want us to stack? So it wouldn't be Boston, because they want us to also choose between Boston and Kane. So they don't want us to stack that together. So that's why that's there. So we have to choose between that. Maybe Dallas is what we're going to have to stack with here. Let's see. Okay, so Letang, you can keep use the Malkin from previous. I think that's the first Minnesota. We haven't seen Monahan yet, have we? I don't think so. No, exactly. So that's the first. We'll see Monahan here somewhere. There's Taves and Oshie. So we're basically being told that we have to choose between Washington and Chicago. Washington, Chicago. Washington, Chicago, and Washington again. Chicago and Washington again. So I'm sure later on here in a queue we're going to see a Chicago with no Washington. That makes us flip that on the other side, reverse engineer it. You know what I mean? So tier 4, let's jump to tier 5. We got Palmieri, Kessel, Forsberg, Klingberg, Backstrom, Petrie, Tarasenko. Okay, so we can keep just clicking Washington if we wanted to. We have more Dallas options here with Seguin, but we haven't seen Ben yet. So that's interesting. So they want us to stack that in 2 and 5. And then what's 1, 3, and 4 that we can stack? Washington, obviously. Then we have to choose Washington here. So there must be a team. They must want us to do the Chicago. See if we go Chicago here again. Chicago. Yeah, see exactly the very next tier. We get Jamie Benn. Okay, see, I hope you guys are learning a lot here and seeing how I'm piecing this together and how to figure out what tiers is all about. Because, like I said, DraftKings puts these players in here for a reason. They're setting this up for a reason. This is scripted in. These salaries are scripted in. So we just have to figure out what the scripts are. So there's the Chicago-Dallas stack that they want us to build. And I'm assuming there's something that we can either stack here with Zucker and Suter, or wonder if Ryan O'Reilly's line mates over here somewhere. No. What else can we do? Montreal, Gallagher, and Tatar. So like, yeah, you get my point here. This is very obviously what they want us to do. So yeah, let's jump back here. Sorry. Where were we here? Right? Yeah. So because then we get more Washington. So like right now they're basically just telling us to click Washington. Click. Washington there. No Washington there. No Washington there. So I bet there's even a stack here with again that's 6, 7, or 7, 8, and we can take an outlier in 6. So you can even like kind of double down on that previous Chicago Dallas stack because it takes the exact same space up as this one does, and use the same kind of sequence of players that you use to fill in the other Dallas Chicago stack. So there's obviously another stack they want us to do. But yeah, that should really give you an idea how to break down tiers. And now for cash, we can literally just do cash. Like, well, we'll literally pick any of them. It's literally a pick 'em. Any of the first 3, Bergeron, Say, and Kuznetsov. Obviously, you want to relate it to what you're doing over here. And then the third one, you can definitely go Carlson. You can go Malkin. You can go DeBrincat if you're going Chicago, though I'd rather diversify and probably just take Taylor Hall over everyone. And Jack Eichel makes a really good GPP when you start stacking. I bet there's some cool Buffalo stacks you can put in. Next one, Letang, Parise, Goudreau, Taves, Oshie. I'd probably go Taves, especially some kind of lining up towards going Kane earlier and DeBrincat. So that may be where I end up going there. Parise is a viable. Pittsburgh is viable if you're taking some Pittsburgh with the Malkin and the Kessel, which I'm sure is in there somewhere too. So yeah, gives you an idea. Oshie isn't really cash to me. He's more of the stack. And Goudreau would be purely a stack for me. Tier 5, Palmieri, Kessel, Forsberg, Klingberg, Backstrom, Petrie, Tarasenko. I'm probably leaning towards Kessel. That way you can probably fill in the Malkin in here instead of Taylor Hall, and it doesn't really cost you too much. Now, at the same time, you can either choose between Malkin and Kessel or Hall and Palmieri. You'll see those two. So I think that either choosing one of those two is really viable for cash. And the rest are all just GPP flyers for me. Tier 6, Jamie Benn, Giroux, Nugent Hopkins, Atkinson, Paranen, Marchand, Crosby, Domi. I'm probably just going to go Jamie Benn to make sure I have exposure, even if I don't have Seguin or Klingberg from earlier. If not him, I'm probably more likely to go with one of the Columbus wingers. I think they have the most upside, or Marchand, and just try and get him in to make sure I have Boston exposure, because it wouldn't surprise me just to tag in some Boston there. And it looks like Boston and Dallas, you kind of have to choose between them in terms of the stacks. Tier 7, Riley, Voracek, Kachuk, Gallagher, Ryan Suter, Skinner, Subban, Kreider. Probably Ryan Suter would be my cash play from this group. You could get away with a few other ones, but he's just going to be playing 25 minutes. Subban isn't the worst, but I'd rather go Suter. And Tier 8, Zucker, Horvat, Tatar, Arvidsson, Lindholm, Draisaitl, Zuccarello, Keller. What was... I saw, never mind. This one's a little bit tougher. Probably go Bo Horvat in cash here. Maybe Zucker. Maybe no. That's where I would go. Either Bo Horvat or Zucker. Probably Bo Horvat. I'm not afraid whatsoever. He's literally like he's a poor man's Connor McDavid in terms of like all his team has. So yeah, there you go. That is the slate breakdown. That is the tiers and classic. Thanks for tuning in. Sorry this ran so long again once more, as pretty well all my videos do. But yeah, I really appreciate everyone tuning in. I'll have everything timestamped below, so later on if you want to review stuff, you can just go down and check that. RotoPros.com. Get over, check us out, like and subscribe these videos. Hit me up on Twitter, RadRobDiamond, Sir Robert 6 and all the main sites. Get on our Slack so I can talk to you there. That's usually the best way to get at me. So thanks a lot for tuning in. Good luck, everyone, tonight. Thank you very much. Take care. Much love.